Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever it is for you. Hope you've been having a great day so far. Today I'm having a pretty good day. It is 10:19 a.m. for me, and I just wanted to post something about fantasy basketball. I just wanted to get some more fantasy basketball information out there. Today it's going to be more or less similar to last episode. It's going to have buy lows. It's not going to have any sell highs right now, and then we're going to just have a ton of waiver wire pickups, and this is for deeper leagues, but I think even for those 10, 12, 13, 14 person leagues, you could still use this. And like I've said before, my team is in a 15-team league. Don't ask why it's not a 16-team league. It is just because of a lack of a good commissioner. So we are going to start out today with our buy lows. And to start out, this is a player that I mentioned last week, but he's in a different situation. He's going to be DeLon Wright. I don't know how many rosters actually have him, but he's definitely someone to look out for. I said to pick him up last week just due to Josh Jackson's injury and because of the general lack of depth at the Pistons shooting guard position. I know they have Svi Mykhailiuk and a couple other great players that will rotate into that two-guard position, but DeLon Wright was really the only one that would fill it in as a shooting guard. But now we have Killian Hayes injured. I don't know if DeLon Wright's going to move up to the starting lineup, be the point guard. That's all I can assume. I don't think Derrick Rose is going to be starting. He can't handle those 30 minutes, and I think he could, but I think it's just not worth the risk of him injuring himself again. Just because Derrick Rose is so solid, you can't afford to not have him. DeLon Wright recently has only had 7 fantasy points and 7.5. And if you don't know what that means in my league, it just means he had 3 points, 1 rebound, 3 assists, 1 steal, 2 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal. This could be a guy that really could turn your team around, especially if he can get extended run at the point guard position. Point guard will give him more fantasy points and more opportunity for fantasy points because assists equal fantasy points. If he's going to be playing the point guard, he's going to get a lot more opportunity for that. And the next player on this list of buy lows is a player that I always mess up his name and confuse him with his brother. This is Bojan Bogdanovic. He is the 35th ranked small forward, power forward. He averages 13 points a game. He's rostered in 54% of leagues. This is one player that was a huge part of the Jazz success last season. I know he went out with, I think it was a wrist injury in May, and so he's back after a season-ending injury. And he has not been super solid so far. He started out the season getting 16.5 points, 13 points, then 26 fantasy points. Then since then, he had negative 0.5, 6, 32.5, which was a big breaking out game, then 6 and 5. And all the games he's scored high is when he's gotten a lot of those fantasy points. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but he doesn't get a lot more than those points. So I think he has a big chance to bounce back. And because of his recent performances and because of his whole season performances, you probably can get him for a pretty cheap cost. And his most recent games, he had 6 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 4 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist. Then before that was 28 points, 1 rebound, 3 assists, 1 steal. Then you go back to being mediocre at 6 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 3, 1, and 1. And I think you just need to try to get this guy, even if it's just to sit on your bench to see if he can get any better, because the Jazz really need him if they want to be amazing. I know they've been playing really well recently, but I think they need him to get to the next level. And if you can get him for something pretty cheap for a low draft pick player or even a waiver wire player that's gone off, I think it's definitely worth it, especially if you don't need that other player. And our last player in the buy low category is very similar to Bojan Bogdanovic. It is going to be Evan Fournier. He missed the last 3 games due to a back injury, and he hasn't really had an amazing start to the season as well. Actually, he did have a pretty decent start to the season, but ever since that first game, his stats have just gone down and down and down. So he started with 32.5 fantasy points, then 17.5, and then he actually went up to 18.5, then went down to 15, then down to 6, and then sat. And I believe the game where he had only 6 fantasy points is when he sat, but I think this guy sat just because he was out injured and because he wasn't doing all that well, especially for being drafted in the 9th round. I think you could definitely get him for some low cost, kind of like Bojan Bogdanovic, and I think he's an integral part to the Magic. He has been for a few years now. He is a great three-point shooter, and with Fultz out, I know Cole Anthony's going to get more playing time. Michael Carter-Williams is going to get more playing time. This guy might have more opportunity to handle the ball, and I know Markelle Fultz is a guy that kind of needs the ball in his hands to contribute to the team, but I think he's going to get more touches, especially when he's healthy, and there's no reason to believe he won't be a good part of their offense this season because he has been the past few seasons. Now we're going to move on to a player I talked about last week, and this is going to be in terms of the waiver wire pickup for deep leagues. And I said it was too late to pick him up, and it might be too late to pick him up now, but it's something to look out for if people don't watch basketball, don't look at the news. It's Cole Anthony. I know I said it was going to be a little bit tough because he plays with Fultz and Michael Carter-Williams, but Markelle Fultz is out for the season after having a great start and kind of proving a lot of those doubters wrong, which really sucks, but that does give Cole Anthony more time and more minutes on this Magic team that really needs some youth integrated into it. They've kind of been doing the same thing for the past few years, so I would be really excited if I'm a Magic fan. If I was a Magic fan, I would be really excited about Cole Anthony and what he can bring to this roster. And next up, we're going to move on to Robert Williams III. He is a player that I really like. I actually collect some of his basketball cards, a lot of his rookies. I have about 4 or 5 of them, one of his jersey patches, which is really cool. But these past 3 games, he has been on a tear. He's been on a mission. He, in only limited minutes, I mean, the past 3 games, he had 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 17 minutes, and he put up 15 fantasy points, 33.5 fantasy points, and 15.5. And in those amount of minutes, that's really good stat line. And I know in the one when he had 20 minutes, he had a double-double with 11 points, 15 boards, 1 steal, 2 blocks. He did have 3 turnovers, but that's a really solid stat line. And if he can keep getting his minutes up, which it kind of looks like he's been having a little uptick recently, he's going to be a very solid option. He might overtake Tice or Thompson in the rotation. But the only thing to look out for is how will you make a 3-center rotation work? That is going to be the big question for him. He's definitely someone to hold on to just because he's great on defense, but it is in limited minutes. But we should see his minutes grow, especially because he's a younger center. This is kind of the center they need, more defensive-minded center. And he's just their high-energy guy. So definitely keep him on the watch list and maybe add him if you have an extra spot. Next up is kind of the same situation as Jakob Poeltl for the San Antonio Spurs. He plays also in limited minutes, but he really shouldn't. He, last game against the Clippers, put up 2 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals for 14.5 fantasy points, only in 19 minutes. In the game before that against Utah, 24 minutes, 11 points, 7 boards, 4 assists, and with 22.5 fantasy points. And that's very solid for this kind of player. In the past few years, I don't think the Spurs have really given him enough credit, given him enough minutes. I watch the Spurs because I married into a Spurs family. They love the Spurs, and so I now like the Spurs, I guess. Either way, he's a player that really deserves more minutes just because of his contributions on the defensive end, and you might not always see it in the stat column, but he's a player that will go out there and give you some grit and toughness. He will not back down from your biggest players. He will try to get the block. He's kind of like Tiago Splitter trying to dunk on LeBron, but just gets blocked. Either way, I don't know. That didn't really make sense, but we're going to move on from him. We're going to move on to Eric Pascal. He is a player that also gets limited minutes, but is deserving of more minutes. I think he personally could be the second best scorer on the Warriors. I think he's had great 2 games in a row with 20 minutes and 22 minutes. He put up 19, 3-1 and 14, 7-4 for each above 20 fantasy points. And I think you could see his role grow on the Warriors. And like I said, he's the potential second best scorer on their team. And he's actually, I think his minutes have been at an uptick. So the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, he went from 13 minutes to 17 to 17 to 22 to 20. So he's finally cracked that 20-minute mark on the year. And I think he's going to stay there, especially because if he's their second best scorer on the team, they need to give him all the minutes he can get. And we have about 3 more players, but the third to last is going to be JaMychal Green of the Denver Nuggets. He has been very solid so far in the 3 games he has played. First game, he only played 12 minutes, so that's kind of not a non-factor. He put up 8 points, 4 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal. But that's only in 12 minutes, and that's for 14 fantasy points. So let's just think if you double that, 24 minutes, 28. And if you get him up to 36, that's going to be a lot of stats. But I don't think this player would ever play 36 minutes. Another positive is that he is a power forward center, so if you do need that power forward position, which seems to be pretty weak in fantasy basketball, this is definitely a guy to look at. But the past 2 games are the things that you really want to look at. On the third against Minnesota, he played 27 minutes, getting 14 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, and 2 steals for 20.5 fantasy points. And then last game against Minnesota on the 5th, he put up 17 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist in 20 minutes for 21 fantasy points. This is a guy who's been a role player and a great role player on contending teams. I know last year he was on the Clippers, so he's definitely going to be a great factor for this Denver team, especially with the loss of Jeremy Grant and who else was it? Torrey Craig. I know Torrey Craig was more of a small forward, but this guy is kind of going to be that guy to take some of those minutes from the people that Denver has lost, and I think he could be a really good contributor to them. So definitely keep him on the watch list. If you can afford to pick him up, I mean, I think he's worth it. He's averaging 18.5 points on the season. Next player is a player for the Minnesota Timberwolves, Jared Vanderbilt. He's averaging 15.7 points per game, and he's only rostered in 1.9% of leagues. Last game was his best game of the season. In 23 minutes, he put up 11 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks. So he really did everything there. And I think his value will really 100% depend on Karl Anthony Towns and how long he's going to be out for an injury. I know he had wrist issues, and I don't really know how much longer he's going to be out, but he's only played in a few games this season. So if you need a guy who can fill in that power forward spot for a few games and get you maybe 15 to 25 points, he's definitely a guy to look at. And last but not least, we have Justin Holiday on the Indiana Pacers. And he's been actually pretty solid up to this point, averaging 16.5 fantasy points, and he's the 28th ranked shooting guard, small forward. Past 2 games are his big games. He's been playing a ton of minutes. He's had 24.5 fantasy points in 32 minutes. He had 20 points, 5 rebounds, 1 steal, which gave him 24.5. And then the game before that, he played 45 minutes, getting 9 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, 1 block for 21.5. This is a guy that's going to be playing a lot of those minutes on this Indiana team. So if you need a guy who can fill in at the shooting guard or small forward position, he's definitely got to look at, because if you're going to be playing that many minutes, you're destined to have some good games here and there. And so these are just kind of some players that I think would be a good idea to look at, some players to buy low. Maybe next time I'll get back into the sell highs, but I think that it's more beneficial to look at some of these waiver wire guys. And this has been a really fun episode. I really like doing all this fantasy stuff. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing it every other day, but it definitely might be something where I do it a couple times a week. So this has been really fun. Thank you for joining me on the Ledgie podcast. I'm your host, DJ. Have a good day.